Now to breaking news out of the UK. European Union officials say they've agreed with Britain on the text of a new Brexit deal. It still has to be voted on by EU leaders and then the UK Parliament, but it means the possibility Britain will crash out of Europe is lessened dramatically. Let's go to Professor Benjamin Laker from Henley Business School live in London for us. Benjamin, what's the latest? Any idea what the deal is?
Legalities and the technical detail of the deal, that is yet to be shared with journalists. But the key thing that we do know is it has been agreed by the UK and the European Union. As you say, it will be put to a vote in the House of Commons unprecedentedly this Saturday, where Boris Johnson will need mass support from his side and the other side to get this thing through. But potentially we have, in the first time in 3 years, some Brexit resolution.
Benjamin, what's the next step now?
So Boris Johnson will need to be gaining support from his party, but also from the other parties, particularly because we know that the Confidence and Supply Partner, that's the Northern Irish Party, DUP, have said that they do not like the deal and they potentially will vote against it. And that will mean Boris Johnson, between now and Saturday's vote, will need votes from the other side, from possibly Labour. And we have heard in the last half an hour that leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, has said he doesn't like the deal either, and he's going to be asking his members to vote against it. So between now and Saturday, Boris Johnson is on a real campaign of popularity. He needs the votes. Doesn't matter where they come from, as long as they vote for his deal.
All right, now, you know, you've been around British politics for a long time. What do you think the chances are, the likelihood of this passing the UK Parliament as it stands right now?
As it stands, I would say it has a greater chance of passing than not, and partly that's just due to the time pressure. And the October 31st date has been burned on the memories of many people. They are fearful of leaving the European Union without a deal, and Boris Johnson has potentially delivered on his promise. He has brought a deal to the table, an orderly exit from the European Union. It's going to be politically quite damaging now if Jeremy Corbyn and other parties vote against it, because they will then be held responsible for ushering in a no deal. So Boris Johnson has played a blinder here. He either is going to be responsible for achieving the impossible, which was a deal, or the opposition parties will be held responsible for torpedoing his deal and therefore getting a no deal.
That was the next question I was going to ask you, Benjamin. How important is this for Johnson as Prime Minister of Britain, and particularly in the sense of his re-election prospects?
This is going to do him a massive favour, because one could argue he is now sitting in a win-win situation. He's either going to be held up in a Churchillian way as the man who delivered Brexit, or he will be the man who the opposition torpedoed, and therefore he will still bring Churchillian rhetoric to the table, because he will then show how the opposition parties have ushered in the chaos that a potential no deal can cause. So expect very soon, possibly first week of November, Boris Johnson to call a general election. And as we know, he's significantly ahead in the polls, and that was before today's announcement. So expect this announcement to push him even higher in the polls, and that all points to him achieving a huge majority at November's general election.
Benjamin Laker, always a pleasure to have you on the front page. Really appreciate your insights into what is a fascinating political situation there in the UK. Thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you.
All right, let's go back to our panel. Michael Owen from Owen Media Relations in Adelaide, and of course, finance editor for news.com.au, Alexis Carey. I might just get your thoughts very quickly on the Brexit situation. We might go to the front of the Australian. There's a story there. Boris, EU agree on deal for Brexit. And of course, the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald has the story as well. Brexit breakthrough for Johnson and EU. There's a photograph there a pap shot of a smiling Boris Johnson, as you would expect. All right, Michael, your thoughts on this. Has he had a blinder, as Benjamin just said, Boris Johnson, on this issue?
Yeah, well, I think that a deal with the EU was always potentially on the cards. Of course, the big unknown is whether or not he can get it through a very hostile British Parliament, and I think there's a special sitting on Saturday of that Parliament, but all the signs are that while this still may be have been done with the EU, it's the problem at home that's going to remain. And look, there's even calls for a second referendum and a whole bunch of issues about whether or not they can get this through into next year. So it's not over by a long shot, I would say.
Alexis?
Yeah, look, I mean, I agree. There's a part of me that doesn't really believe that this will ever be resolved. We've just heard this chaos has been going on for 3 years now. So on the one hand, I'm kind of not getting too excited that we're going to hear the end of it just yet. But yeah, as we've just heard, if Boris Johnson does end up pulling this off, then it's going to be amazing for him politically, for his career. But as I said, remains to be seen. So let's just wait and see to what happens on Saturday.